Using the whip well can take some practice, but it's really all about getting your center organized and having a nice elasticity in your joints. So when we think about the hand, whether it's riding or giving a drive aid with the whip, the hand doesn't really stop at the hand. The hand actually goes all the way up the back of your neck and down your back. So whenever you're using your hand, it has to come from your center. So if you lock your arm, that doesn't come from your center, and it creates a very antagonistic drive aid. And that's going to make the opposite effect of what you're looking for, which is a fluid and supple response. So if you are to drive the horse's leg and you get a response with the whip, that's what we're looking for. But if I lock my arm, first it's painful. Those two feelings are very different. And then I get a jerky response. So it's not really doing what we want the whip to do. So finesse with the whip is really important. When you use the whip, I want to position it so that the base of the whip is in the palm of my hand here. So that's really the support of the whip. Then I just gently wrap my fingers around it. So if I'm using the whip from this position, I've got a very buoyant wrist, and you can practice in your living room or in your barn or wherever you are. Just practice bouncing the whip on a straight line. You don't want it to go out of control. Just pick a line and bounce it up and down. That's the feeling you want to have when you're using the whip. And even if you have to vibrate, that feeling, you can practice it on your own leg. Do everything on your own leg. You can brush or vibrate. Even if you vibrate a little more firmly, that's not really painful because your joints are supple, and that keeps that whip kind of elastic feeling. Whereas if you lock your arm and you practice that, now that starts to snap and that starts to sting. So you don't want the whip to cause pain. You want the whip to cause awareness and openness. You brush forward, you can vibrate, brush, or you tap, tap, tap. But even if you tap, 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 even a little more firmly, the way that I'm using the whip right now, I'm not hurting my leg. I'm testing it on myself. This is not creating pain, whereas this, that now hurts. So practice it on your own leg or your husband's leg if you'll stand still for long enough, and practice getting a buoyant and elastic feeling. Make sure when you're using the whip, your wrist is supple, your elbow is relaxed, your shoulder is relaxed, your chest is open, and keep your jaw relaxed, because just clenching your jaw makes the whip suddenly much more antagonistic. When you're forward, your wrist is going to be in this position. If you're facing backward, you're going to flip it the other way. So now you're going to have the whip under your thumb, like so. And if the horse was beside you, say the horse's ears are this way, now you still have that same feeling as I'm walking, but the whip is still buoyant. So don't be afraid to practice transitioning from a forward to a backward facing whip. And if you brush or side, say you're brushing the belly, the wrist always stays very supple, because as soon as you clench the wrist, your steps get really erratic. So if say I'm driving my imaginary horse, I can feel my feet really nicely because my elbow and wrist are supple. But the minute I tension this, my steps now become very jerky. So your hand has to go from your center to your feet. Anytime you lock your arm, you're going to lose your center, tighten the feeling in your legs, and your legs are then going to create a very erratic and very tight feeling. A really fun way to practice is to get a balloon and practice moving it on a straight line. And that'll give you the feeling for what your whip needs to feel like. So if you're doing this, make sure you're out of the wind or it'll blow your balloon all over the place. But I set my balloon down. I like to do this with my students in the barn because it's really fun. I want to move the balloon as straight as I can down there. So I have to get my whip really supple feeling. And I'm going to just gently move it, little strokes in a straight line. If I start to smack it and I tighten my wrist, you can see how I lose the whip. So if I tighten my wrist, I can't make subtle motions. I have to do jerky ones. Whereas if I keep my wrist supple and keep my feet steady, I can now move it gently on a straight line. And in order to correct it, I can kind of feel on the balloon where that little drive aid needs to come. So here gives you a really good idea of what in-hand work is like. This is a straightening, suppling, and guiding aid, and here's your halt. It's just a settling. So practice using your whip, moving it in straight lines, moving it sideways, try to keep it accurate. Practice it on your own leg or another person and get feedback, because we never want the whip to sting. Again, even if you tap a little more firmly, this does not hurt my leg. The minute I tighten my wrist, now I'm snapping, and that does hurt. So get a feel for what you're doing before you do it to the horse, and get some organization and practice in using your joints of your arm in coordination with your center, with your hips, all the way down to your feet, so that everything is just one big orchestra and you're just conducting the music with the whip.